how old were you when you started performing at the opera?
7.
How would you feel if any of your kids wanted to... Yeah. Well, Emmy, welcome to One Nightstand.
Thank you.
We're so thrilled to have you here.
Me too.
Have you always been a big reader?
I resisted reading as a child.
Did you?
I was a late reader.
Me too, in a way, yeah.
Really? What age?
Well, maybe that's not true. I read a lot, like...
Yeah, you're like, I was reading at 18 months. I was very resistant at 12 months.
I don't know if I basically just stopped as a teenager.
You did?
Yeah, and then got back into it as an adult. But anyway, carry on.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think I really wanted to read until 2nd or 3rd grade. I think I was the youngest in my class going into, I turned 5 on the first day of kindergarten.
Wow.
Everyone was somewhere almost 10 or 11 or almost 12 months older than me. And so I think the idea that people were learning to read more rapidly than I was developmentally makes sense now, but certainly felt intimidating at the time. So I felt an internal resistance to doing things that were hard or that I might not be good at. Virgo, reforming perfectionist. But I really loved reading and writing. By the time I was 9, 10, 11, loved children's books. And then, of course, reading is a huge part of my job, too. Reading, being analytical. But of course, most of what I read is in script or play form. And I don't have to explain this now because so many people know what that aesthetically looks like, but it's quite white on the page. It's quite blank and empty, and there's lots of spaces to fill in. So much of my job is filling in the blanks in the big white piece of paper around the dialogue and around the stage direction. And so I love to read a book because it fills in so much of the work that I generally have to do to create the kind of edges and the girth of the character. And so I love to lose myself in a book.
And do you read looking for IP to develop or not so much?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, always. And also sometimes not.
Yeah.
And I really don't like digital reading. There's something about it that doesn't quite stick in my brain.
Yeah.
I don't mind an audiobook, but I prefer the kind of way I can imagine my way into the space of what the character's voice sounds like in my imagination. I also like to leave room for happy accidents and mistakes. Like I was a huge Harry Potter fan, and I thought that the female character's name was Hermione.
I did too.
You did not.
I swear to God.
You
and I was
did not.
literally thinking about telling that story just like 20 seconds ago when you first said that. I thought it was Hermione. And then when they
100%.
adapted it, I was like, Hermione?
No. Well, I saw like the trailer for the movie and I remember she's like, I'm Hermione. And I was like, oh, that does sound so much better.
Yeah. I
for years, and I was like first online at Barnes & Noble. Like I was ready for the new books. I've always really liked fantasy. I love House of Dragon. Like I love fantasy TV shows too. I don't think I've really made any. Anime maybe, but not really like, wizards and dragons. There's still time.
There's still time.
Yeah, but I have always loved kind of book series, and I've always loved a book too that has kind of a singular POV and a singular voice where I get to spend a couple hundred pages really inhabiting less plot, but the voice of the person and really understanding how small things in their world can shape them or change them.
Agents are kind of definitely pushing writers away from that, I think, based on what I taught. The sort of guidance that a lot of my friends who are writers get now from editors and agents is that people like multi-perspective novels. But I'm with you. I like sinking into one person's world and like seeing it. Sure.
I think it depends as a producer when you're thinking about developing IP, finding IP and building it out. It is helpful if there are multiple storylines. It makes it bigger. It makes it, if it's very helpful if there's a propulsive engine. Reverse engineering that is quite difficult sometimes. But I think the core of what we come back to isn't necessarily the stickiness of the idea or the plot, but the characters and the way that we see ourselves in them. And certainly when I'm looking for IP to develop, I'm looking for a character that is challenging or an idea, central question that is challenging something in me that starts to feel challenged or uncomfortable, or just scratches some part of my brain that I can't quite put away.
Yeah, I love that.
I also think the easiest elevator pitch is sometimes the answer. When something is really easy to explain and really sticky and will prompt a conversation, that is generally the thing that gets made.
Totally. Well, I think one of the first books that we're going to talk about today has such a great elevator pitch, which is Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy.
Yeah.
Which is, we had Jennette on when she was bringing out the book, and it's so incredible. But tell me what you loved about this book.
I found this book online.
Okay.
I have never read her first book, which I know had a lot of heat around it. And I was intrigued by the intensity of the character's journey. So I bought the book. I'm usually finding books at my local library, actually, or my local bookstore. But this one I happened to find online. I think I read a review of it or some comments about it. I'm always interested also in other creatives. Obviously, Jennette is an actress and a director and now a writer. I'm very interested in people who find their way into their voice in other ways. And so I couldn't put this book down. I think I read it in about a day. I loved that the central figure, Waldo, is this 17-year-old girl who's living in Anchorage, Alaska, which Alaska has a special place in my heart because I vacationed for a month there when I was 7 with my mom.
Oh, wow.
We were just like backpacking around and
that.
catching our own dinner and trying to evade bears, actually. And Alaska is in itself very kind of isolated and remote place and kind of a beautiful wilderness in many ways, which actually reminds me a lot of this lead character who is so lonely and isolated, and her dad's seemingly MIA. Her mom is more interested in kind of how her own dating successes might be able to save them rather than being a mom. And inside the character is insecure and scared and lonely and a ball of desire and yearning to create and to connect. And it starts in a very familiar way with her English teacher taking an interest in her talent initially, which kind of sets her on fire. And then she becomes totally obsessed with him and pursues a romantic and sexual relationship with him, Mr. Corgi, who's 40 and married. And I suppose I was really taken by the way that someone believing in you creatively can change your life. It becomes very complicated for the two of them. But I was really taken by the way that the character seems confused as to whether she actually wants this or just wants to be wanted.
Yeah. Which is very relatable when you're 17 and
so lonely.
Yeah, exactly.
And confused.
Yeah. And looking for sort of, well, she's looking for a way out, isn't she? And I think she thinks maybe he's it. And then I loved the ending because and one of the questions I asked Jennette was like, you know, how do you think her life goes after? And she was like, I do not believe this is a tragedy that will define her. And about, you know, this relationship with her teacher. And I think this end scene of how she leaves, it does feel kind of like she's realized she's her own way out in a way. And she's sort of like backing herself.
Can't rely on her mom.
Yeah, she can't. And so she's like, it felt inspiring to me.
Yeah, because she doesn't get on the plane to Hawaii, right? Yeah. I mean, it's weird because she gets what she wants.
Yeah.
She gets him. She wins him.
Yeah.
And then the more time she actually spends with him, the more she becomes kind of disgusted by the things that she thought were so interesting about him.
Totally.
And I was also kind of wondering if he, who is kind of like a failed creative himself, was also kind of like can never quite get his book off the ground. Some people, he seems quite stalled and almost like in this misguided attempt to think, well, maybe this could do something to my creativity.
He's like leeching onto her.
Disgusting.
Yeah, like a host body.
Yeah, it's really shocking.
Yeah.
And the bit where they're at the hotel together is like so disturbing.
Oh, I know.
And I just thought it was so well written.
I know.
And it really felt like that messy 17-year-old, I don't know what I want, so I'm going to put on a lot of eyeliner and order some cheap clothes that make me look hot, and I'm going to figure my life out. And you're like, no,
totally.
don't do it.
I know, and she writes the like the mundane character of suburbia, and like I think so well, and like the like dingy hotel, the like the apartments that she's the richer friend who's like taking pity on her. I don't know, I just think it's all so well crafted.
Yeah, and she's so desirous of stuff in her life to fill the void. When he's not texting her back, she's like shopping online, and those kind of impulses that satisfy our kind of yearning and our loneliness that fill that moment for us feel so tragically familiar.
Was there anyone early in your career who you felt really saw your creativity or talent and in a way that helped you or hindered you in any way?
Both, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's people that, I mean, I had a lot of coaches early on that were rigorous and hard on me, and that definitely helped shape my internal engine. But also I believe now that there's a lot of fun to be had, and that in taking things less seriously, there's room for surprise and freedom. And that I think the best moments in scenes, or the ones that I experience the most joy in, are the ones where surprising things happen, where there is a lack of control.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think when I think about younger sort of like mentors early in my career, or people who helped me when I was at school or something, I think the thing that it took me a while to realize is that you can like take the affirmation from it, and you can take the sort of like supportiveness, but you don't have to follow the path that they have suggested you follow with that talent that they've said you have. Like, I think when I was younger, I was definitely pushed to like, oh, you're a bright kid and you know you could make money, so you're going to be a lawyer, right? Or you're going to be a banker. And that idea that it was like, oh, I can choose what I want to do. I don't have to like follow the path that someone has like decided is the right one for your talents or whatever.
Certainly. And I think part of growing up is finding your own way about things, and trying lots of different things.
Yeah.
I had a full goth phase when I was like about 14 years old. Oh yeah.
I love that.
Very like Wednesday Addams summer. And I think it only lasted a summer. But I was very into it and very committed to that being my identity forever. That didn't last. But yeah, I think it is important to find yourself, and sometimes the ways in which our teachers initially believe in us as the next generation of what they created is inspiring and energizing, and ultimately sometimes limiting of our full capabilities.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And you sort of have to, especially if you're a people pleaser, or you like to be given the pat on the shoulder and say good job. I love that. Exactly.
Gold star kids.
Exactly. And so that idea of being like, you're not going to be happy with what I'm deciding now, but I feel like it's the right thing for me, is I think something hard.
Yeah,
but
totally.
You really just have to do it.
I'm proud of us.
Through. I know. We made it. And then one of the other things that I sort of like loved about this book is that, you know, Jennette, and I think she speaks about this explicitly, she kind of wanted to resist any kind of moral framework that felt too rigid and too sort of binary, or like the terms of the equation were like sort of set out at the beginning and we're just going to follow that course. Are you drawn to art like that has that sort of flexibility? Because it reminded me a little bit when I was watching the first few episodes of Furious, and you're sort of, I love the way that in those first few episodes you're you're like, oh, well, how much do I dislike this serial killer? She's killing these bad men. And then the stuff with the daughter in episode 2, and you're a bit like, okay, I'm getting uncomfortable now. I don't know. That sort of moral ambiguity is always so interesting to me, but I'm curious what your take is on that.
I think those are the most interesting characters. In my life, I would like to think I'm a moral person. At least I try to be. I think we all do try to be the best versions of ourselves, even when we come up short. But I think, the juiciest characters and certainly the 2 female leads here are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. I think both women have been victims of violence. Both are looking for justice, and you could argue one's looking for vengeance in kind of unorthodox ways. Both are very underestimated by society, and therefore have to and are able to work outside the normal lines of morality in the gray area. And so I think that you see that it's funny reading the scripts. I was like, am I really identifying with the serial killer right now? Am I like hoping she kills all these people? And really, I think that is also kudos to Lola Pettigrew's performance, which is so embodied and so brave and so raw and charming and vulnerable, that we can connect with a killer in that way and want to get to the bottom of what happened to them and why they're picking these people to kill. And similarly with Alice, my character who's working at the FBI newly and was a detective at the NYPD who left because of a toxic and ultimately abusive relationship she found herself in with another officer. I think you see that she is, head down, very focused at work, very, very internally driven, obsessive about her work, and also that there are problems that she's ignoring about getting justice of what's happened to her personally that's starting to affect her in every way. We see that she's kind of unable to shower. People say that she smells, which is kind of a funny thing for a character that you're watching because you can't experience that as the viewer, so we have to kind of explain it to you in a lot of different ways. And something that's quite shameful to smell in society. And I thought that was so brave that Liz Meriwether, our incredible writer, is giving these women these kind of unforgivable traits. And I find that quite delicious.
And then humanizing them as well in a way that makes you sort of understand their motivations in a way, and empathize with their motivations.
And ultimately be challenged by them. I mean, for me, reading the first episode, we know that Alice has some trauma in her past just by her vibe and her way of going about the world and how kind of closed off she is, and because we're told that. And we see also that she's swiping and calling these guys over to her house to fight her. Seemingly under the guise to have sex, but then she really just wants to fight. And we see that is a confusing turn on for her, somebody who has had abuse in her past. And so when you read that in a script, you read it and you're terrified of playing the scene. What are we saying? What does it mean? And the more that I thought about it and my own fear of the scene, the more you have to run towards the fire, I think, ultimately. Because I think that for Alice, that kind of fear and desire and history and connection in the relationship she had are kind of all interwoven together with a sense of intensity and violence. And also for a lot of people in high-performing, high-stress jobs where vulnerability is not an asset. Not only is it not an asset, but it could be dangerous in your job. You're so kind of cut off from any softness or connection to yourself in order to perform, in order to go out into the street, in order to find a killer. That I think she really needs that level of intensity to feel anything.
Totally, because she's had to numb. The only way you can get through it is by numbing some of the other parts. It's brilliant. I mean, I was fascinated, and so on the sort of edge of my seat and watching it, and that sort of, you sort of want to unpick the threads on both sides. It's fascinating.
I felt that way when I was reading it as well.
Juicy. Well, next I thought we could talk about We Are Too Many, a memoir, kind of, by Hannah Pittard. Tell me what you love about this book.
I found Hannah's first book. No, this is Hannah's first book. I found Hannah's more recent book at my library, where right when you walk in, they have a wall with the librarian's picks every month. And this one, for whatever reason, the cover caught my eye because it's bright blue and it just had text on it that said, I think the title is, If You Love It, Let It Kill You. And so I read this book, and I generally will give a book the first 5 pages to see if I really like the voice.
Yeah.
And then I'll either read the whole thing or I won't ever read it again. Yeah. And this book got me immediately. I loved her voice so much. I blew through the book right away. And then I wanted to go back and read the first book, which is We Are Too Many, a memoir kind of. I love this book because it kind of reads like a play. It's quite sparse in its scenes, and it's set up as a series of conversations between really the core 3 people are a version of Hannah, the author herself, a version of her former husband, and a version of her former best friend, and her marriage, which ended because of the affair between her former husband and her former best friend. Yeah. And it's told non-linearly, so you're kind of dropping into different versions of conversations, both remembered and imagined, and also getting to know a little bit about her family, a little bit about how she views herself and her body, and how her relationship between her husband and her best friend might have helped negatively shape her own self-opinion over the last decade.
Yes.
And they're all also creatives and writers as well. So their voices are kind of bright and very distinct. And I thought this book was laugh out loud funny, moving, very vulnerable. I like the absurdity of life, and I definitely got it from this book.
Yeah. One of the things I think she talks about this in the introduction is the challenge of like who gets to own a memory and who like, and I think one of the parts I wrote down, she asked the question, is there a legitimate way to own a recollection? Which I think is such a fraught concept, and I think has always been a fraught concept like through history, but especially in our current climate where anyone can document everything and put it online and say something online. And I wonder how you reckon with that as someone who's like a public figure and who people like offer recollections or stories about, and whether like how you sort of connect with your own truth and whether that ever feels difficult. Because I think she does such a good job of just sort of saying, this is my version, and sort of owning that and standing behind it. But I was curious.
I don't think it's much different if you're a public figure than if you're not. Yeah. Because I imagine anybody's memories of that time, you know, Spencer Moonshine pushed me off the, you know, playground swings and, you know, preschool is, he probably has a different memory. I remember it that he said, you know, he said, what do you want to be when you grow up? This is my first boyfriend when I was 3. And I said, a doctor. And he said, girls can't be doctors, only nurses. And I was like, oh. And then he pushed me off the bench, and I didn't break up with him. This is the villain. This is the beginning of my love life. No, but I think there are so many sides to every story, and I think that I mean, what is time? Yeah. What is memory? Like, what is it? It's so funny because it's not unlike, you wonder sometimes if you really have that memory of that birthday party, or it's only because you've seen that picture in your family scrapbook of that moment. Like, do I really remember being in Alaska, or is it just because that vacation was so well documented and the other ones in Florida weren't? Yeah. Yeah. Do I really remember? And also the amount of times you tell a story. Yes. It becomes less something that you're remembering and more like a narrative that you're telling, and something that you get better and better at telling, which is actually more like a performance of a story and less like a memory. Totally. And no less real in terms of the interaction of, I just told you that story about Spencer and we had a real moment about it, but it was probably just as real as when I actually got pushed off the bench. You know what I mean?
Totally.
It's also like memories can be shared or they can be grown. Like, I don't know. I think
nebulous.
Yeah. And also so much of what we do as actors, or at least my process, is cannibalizing my own memories and also learning new things and reading things about other people, reading stories about other people, meeting with other people and learning about their life experiences, and then attaching those to myself as like memories by proxy so that they become a kind of adjacent part of myself so that I can have them to tell the story. So I don't know who owns a memory.
Yeah.
No one really. I guess the moment in time in which it happened, I'm not sure.
And it's funny, when I recently had a doctor's appointment that my mom came to me with, and afterwards we were talking to my dad, and she was like, well, she said this, and I was like, no, she didn't. She was like, yeah, she did, she said that. And I was like, well, we have a completely different recollection of this conversation 2 hours ago. And it's funny the way you hear different things. And has that always been your process, to try and like draw on memories? And like, for example, when you did Phantom or something like that quite young, were you drawing on own experiences or different experiences?
Well, with that specifically, the character is haunted by who she thinks is her dead father.
Yeah.
I didn't have a father growing up, so the yearning for something missing was certainly kind of adjacent to a sadness that I had inside and a yearning that I had inside. But I also went and had an experience at the Spiritualist Society, a kind of seance that I went to kind of see what that was like, and had an experience there that was interesting and surprising, and certainly helped give me a concrete memory of something as I was going into shooting that.
Oh wow, that's amazing. So you were 16 when you cast and 17 when you filmed.
Yeah,
that's very young and brave to be doing those things. I was like,
let's go to a seance.
Literally, I was like getting drunk in the park. And like, I love that you were.
I'm sure I was doing that, like, but when I wasn't shooting. But I think for me, I've always believed in homework. I've always believed in assigning myself homework, and that's always been what made me feel most prepared to go into a job, so that when I need to know enough so that I can suspend my own disbelief. I need to have enough lived experience, or have met enough people who have had the lived experience. Like I clearly wasn't going to become an FBI agent in order to do this show, but I did train with former and current FBI agents and former and current NYPD detectives, so that I could really understand what it was like on a cellular level.
Yeah. Is the beef real between the FBI and NYPD?
No comment.
No comment. I love it. Because I
love them both.
Yeah.
I love them both. No sides have been taken.
Yeah, I love it. No, it's because I love that dynamic in it as well, because it is fascinating the way those organizations work together or against each other.
Yeah, I also think that the female experience in both places is not dissimilar. I mean, women are not as many in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And certainly have a very different experience there in the boys' club. So I think getting to also understand that from the inside and firsthand, and also, Liz Merriweather worked with a lot of agents and detectives, and we also had FBI and NYPD on set with us as advisors. So it was really helpful in moments when you were wondering if there was an opportunity for a moment to have more nuance or depth, to have that person there, or to have that person you were able to call to kind of help underpin the reality of a moment for you.
I love the moment where you take the scissors and drop them into the bag that Marshall's holding, because I'm like, that's sort of all the vibes are going off. It was so good.
It's like, I could stab you, but I guess I'll put them in the bag.
Put it in the evidence bag, exactly. One of the things that I found myself wrestling with with Hannah's book is the sort of, I couldn't decide whether I hated Trish or Patrick more, the like husband or the best friend. And on some level, I think I resented the best friend more. And then I was like, is that some like
She was also always awful.
Always awful?
She was always awful.
Awful. Like, awful the whole way through.
That one moment where she says to her, like years before she even marries Patrick, she says something like, you know, how would you describe your body or something? And Hannah says, like, tidy. And Trish mishears her and goes, tiny. I had to, like, I almost threw the book across the room.
Yeah.
Also, the way in which she always makes herself the central figure of her romantic relationships and seemingly tries to be so kind and like put herself in the middle. It's not unlike a dynamic on The Real Housewives of Rhode Island this year. One character was accused of trying to mediate and help things and really was thought to be perceived as, I don't have a side in this, I promise, thought to be more of an instigator than she was a mediator. And so I think Trish is a little bit of that dynamic that has been alleged and accused.
Are you a Real Housewives person?
I like to do my research, and I recently did a film in Rhode Island and had to have a Rhode Island accent and energy. And so part of my research was watching a lot of The Real Housewives of Rhode Island, which I would love to say didn't become an obsession, but I made it all the way through both reunions.
Oh, good for you.
Thank you so much.
I love that. I've never got into Housewives, but I feel like I should at some point.
It definitely would balance out the intellectualism.
I need to do it. I feel like it's part of the American experience. I've just got to do it while I live here at some point.
I'll shoot you some clips
you can enjoy. That'd be great. Yeah, give me the highlight reel. But no, I found myself raging at her. And then I was like, oh, am I expecting more of women, which I think I tend to like, because with him I was like, of course he's an asshole, but I did find myself
she's
raging.
Diabolical.
Yeah,
she literally calls her and is like, I've met someone, like I'm so in love, I think I really do want to have babies with this person, and then you find out she's talking about her best friend's husband.
Yeah,
it's psychotic.
Yeah, no, totally.
And she's like, but I thought you'd be happy for me, and you're like, girl, what?
Yeah,
it's total crazy.
You should try and adapt this one.
It's a good one.
It would be a really good one. Yeah, because that would be such a, interesting. Because, I mean, imagine trying to do the moral two sides with Trish. I'd be like, trying to.
It is being adapted.
Oh,
I do know that. It is being adapted.
It is. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's interesting.
It is being adapted.
Interesting. Would you?
I am not in it yet.
Okay. Yet.
I am not in it yet.
I love it.
But I would be.
No, it's amazing.
It's great.
And it's so well done. And there's a sort of...
Wait, did you say I would be Trish?
No. I said like, I think you'd be brilliant.
They're both great parts.
They're both great parts, but also I think Trish would be so interesting because to the point of like, even with the serial killer in Furious, with Lola's trying to make you empathize with her.
Yeah.
How the fuck do you make someone empathize with Trish?
I think the women who create the most chaos are sometimes the most insecure or damaged.
Totally.
And so even though we are so firmly rooted with Hannah's character, and Trish is the antagonist.
Yeah.
I certainly think that there's, it's interesting, like what's a memory?
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting to see it from, and you do at moments get to see it from Trish and Patrick's perspectives.
Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant. I really enjoyed reading that one.
Yeah.
Well, next I thought we could talk about Blood Test, a comedy by Charles Baxter.
Yes.
Tell me what you love about this book.
I found this book at my local bookstore. I love to go to the local bookstore it's actually just right on the corner, the corner bookstore, quite literally called the corner bookstore, and ask them, I'll usually say, I'm looking for a book that makes me feel this way, or I'm looking for a character that does something like this. And this was a book that the bookseller hadn't read, but someone else had read it and he had heard it was quite good. I think I said I'm looking for something really funny, but kind of dark.
Yeah.
And I like grounded absurdity. I think that was the prompt.
He bookseller delivered.
He crushed it. I love the title too. And I love the fact that there's this mouse in a glass jar. And this, I think, is this is one of those books that I think is the really easy 15-second elevator pitch, which is basically our lead character is a guy who is an insurance salesman. His wife has left him for a kind of more macho carpenter guy and left him to take care of his 2 teen kids. And this guy doesn't have main character energy. He's not going to do anything unpredictable. He's Mr. Reliable. He is just going to live his life, and nobody is ever going to know about him. And one day he goes in for a routine checkup and is offered an add-on to his blood test. There's a new company, kind of a med tech company that is offering kind of a fate predictor. Let's figure out who you really are.
Yeah.
And so he takes this blood test, even though he knows they couldn't possibly find anything interesting about him because he just is not that interesting of a guy. And in fact, they call him and say, not only are you very interesting, but we're very concerned about you because you're actually going to be a violent criminal, probably a murderer. And so it kind of like really calls into question his identity, who he thinks he is, what he thinks he's capable of. Right after getting this blood test, he goes to get pruning shears for his garden at his local hardware store. And as he's checking out, he's so kind of annoyed at having gotten this inaccurate diagnosis that he thinks, you know what, like if I'm such a criminal, like I guess I'll just steal something and I'm sure I'll immediately get caught and then I'm not a criminal. And he like slips something into his pocket and walks out of the store in addition to the shears that he does pay for. And he gets away with it. And so it kind of starts to kind of mess with his concept of himself, but also challenge the limitations he's accepted about his life.
Yeah.
And the funniest moment comes kind of at maybe the midpoint of the book when the new husband of his ex-wife has made a homophobic comment towards his son. And he's going to show up at this guy's house and really set him straight. And in the middle of this argument, which ends up to be the new husband kind of like puffing out his chest and peacocking a bit and calling him a bunch of names too, the new husband slips on a literal banana peel and falls down the stairs and ends up in a coma, which has nothing to do with what our main character has done. He thinks.
Yeah.
But does he remember it correctly? And then he, in fact, gets a call from the genetics company saying, it's already happening. And so he's not sure if this is a scam or a fraud or if they're somehow going to profit off this. They then ultimately send him a loaded gun for his protection and then ultimately try to sell him a lawyer at half off, which he will eventually need. And it's kind of a wild, absurd, but grounded story about this guy who wonders if maybe he is capable of more, maybe even murder.
Yeah.
And I think in this day and age when we are, as a society, increasingly turning to tech companies to advise us, to help us, to guide our decision making, I think we really have to think about free will.
Yeah.
And if this is more helpful or more harmful.
Yeah. Would you take a test like that if one existed?
Huh.
I know. I don't think I would.
I don't know. I don't think I want to know. Like if someone's like, do you want to know the moment you're going to, like, probably not.
No, probably not. I don't
Probably
think it's
not.
helpful.
Probably not.
It's helpful. I do think it's so interesting, that theme of like, I mean, I think it's a theme running through a lot of these books of like nature versus nurture and the way that our environment shapes us. And it really made me think of Shameless, which I think because that is such a theme, right? Like the environment that, Fiona and the family come up in shapes who they are, but also the world is already telling them that that's who they're going to be. And that sort of tension between the two things of like, and the difficulty of breaking out of a cycle that society has told you is predictive of where you're going to end up. It's really, really hard. And that's why I think I wouldn't take, because I think once you believe something about yourself or believe that a future is inevitable for you, especially if it's a bad one, like, because I think manifestation, I suppose, is the other thing, which would be wonderful if you could manifest something brilliant. But I don't know. I just think it's hard. And I wondered with Shameless whether you guys talked about that, like nature versus nurture thing while you were making it, or like how you thought about that.
We talked a lot about characters who were in a kind of economically depressed environment, but who were not depressed.
Yeah.
Who had each other, who had loyalty, who had family, and kind of the comedy that can come from the absurdity of what it takes sometimes to survive, especially as all these kids were kind of raising themselves and she was the de facto mom. And also the family was not comfortable in their struggle, but very familiar with struggle. So as gentrification was kind of pressing into their neighborhood, and Fiona ultimately does kind of go into real estate and start to fix up these buildings and kind of start to become part of the problem in their minds. I think we are seeing kind of how the world is changing and how she's kind of trying to change with it and how so many of them are not.
Yeah, it's hard. Have you done like a rewatch? Do you ever rewatch your old shows or would you not?
I haven't, although the algorithms do serve clips.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that there are younger and younger people who know the show just from clips.
Totally.
There's like a whole clip
there is
group.
When we were researching for this episode, Sophie, who helps me with research, was like, these clips were posted in the last few weeks and they have 200,000-300,000 likes, and it's all just like clips from the show.
Yeah. So there are some very much younger people who wouldn't have even, been watching the show when it was on, who know it from, that meme or that clip.
Yeah.
But even really have a sense of the dynamics between the characters from clips. So people are clearly consuming entertainment in different kind of more vertical, shorter ways, obviously. But I think it's interesting how it's kind of found a new life that way as well.
Yeah, it's amazing, really. And
I'll always be into long form horizontal, but I do think it is really cool.
And it's really cool because I bet a lot of them will go and then search out that show eventually, and it's such a testament to the power of that its longevity, not just the amount of seasons that it ran, but that it still captures attention in that way. And I think that is because it deals with such a like primal bunch of themes in a way.
Yeah, I think there's also not a lot of families on TV that look like that.
Yeah.
And that are living hand to mouth that way. And that are living with real alcoholism in that way, who are also you're able to laugh with and cry with.
Yeah.
And the characters are also sexually liberated and free, and you're able to get very close to the characters because of the intensity and vulnerability that comes with so many of those scenes and those character arcs.
Yeah.
So I think that they're, for a lot of people who grew up in big, messy, chaotic households that may have had substance problems or just emotional chaos or poverty. I think that there are very few shows that resonate in that way.
Totally.
That, have joy in them too.
Yeah. Talking of memory, is it weird when you see a clip because you'll be like, oh, I remember that day, it was like 2014 and I was tired because I'd been, or do you just be like, oh my gosh, I forgot that episode or something?
Totally. A lot of forgot that episode because I made 110.
Yeah.
Or like, don't ever remember learning that line, which I must have drilled 50 times before I got there, at least. I think, but really loving the dynamics and watching the dynamics and remembering just the tenderness and the fun that we had. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's so nice. Are you guys still in touch?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's so nice. I love that. Those are my favorite, those shows where you can feel that they're still like, makes me feel like they're alive somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Charles's book as well, I mean, it's sort of, the whole our desire to sort of understand more about our future, I think, is so interesting. And I when I first moved to America in 2020, it was popping off in the same way in the UK astrology was, but it was so big here. And I remember when I first started working for Bustle, I'd been at Vanity Fair before that, and in my first week, someone was like, so let's do your chart. And I discovered I was like a triple Libra, and like everyone wanted to sort of understand. And I it's sort of fascinating how much we crave to like know more about our true selves than what we tell when ultimately we get to decide, right? But I'm sort of curious, are you an astrology person? You mentioned being a Virgo earlier, but
I'm an astrology person only so much as I know a little bit about it, and some of it definitely hits.
Yeah, totally.
Like I'm a Virgo married to another Virgo.
Oh, how does that work?
We're both very organized.
We're on a tight ship.
There's a lot of labels in the house. The Brother P-Touch labeler is used often.
Yeah, I love that.
And Sam and I just reorganized our kitchen drawers this Sunday morning. We spent about 2 hours making sure that all the pots were with the pots and the pans were with the pans, and the little, the thing that slices the apple slicer. Yes. Well, it now has a nice little label by it that says apple.
Oh,
so you know where that one goes.
I love that. You guys are so organized.
It's probably too much.
No, I think it's sweet. Do the kids
They love it. They love peeling the labels, putting the labels on.
Oh, that's very sweet.
And it's fine if things get moved around too. Yeah. We'll relabel it in a couple of years.
We practice flexibility, as my therapist says.
We have to.
But yeah, no, it is interesting, that desire for knowing more about ourselves. There is just like a balance to it all, I guess.
Yeah.
You don't want to feel too oppressed by...
Some of it must be right somehow.
With astrology?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't really know about the rising this or the moon that, but I'm open to learning more.
I mean, I think also, I once talked to my therapist about this when a friend recommended I see a psychic, and I was like, "Oh, do we think this is any good?" And she was really pro it, because she said that she'd seen many clients who found a kind of hope from seeing speaking to someone like a psychic, or like, I guess, someone more spiritual, because it gave them belief without like nuts and bolts. I think in the sense of how therapy, I think, can often get very bogged down in like, okay, how am I thinking about this specific problem or this specific relationship? And she was like, and she said to me, she was like, for those few weeks after you came back from seeing the psychic, she was like, you were lighter. And which I thought was really interesting, because does it matter if any of it's true or real, if it has that effect on you? Sure. And it means that you move through the world like that for however long. And I was like, it kind of works then by that extent. So I thought that was interesting.
I've never seen one.
A psychic?
No.
It's interesting. I mean, it's I can give you the names or so if you're curious, because I have a friend who's very clued in with all of that stuff.
There are animal psychics as well, I've heard about. Yeah.
There are. It's interesting. I mean, they never give you sort of information like, look out for July 7th next year. Like,
I need that. That's the kind of information
you're just a Virgo coming up.
Like, wait, where's my July 7th warning? No, I mean, I suppose it makes sense to me in theory, because if the history, if time is like forever and extending both ways, then now and my mom or my grandma are on top of each other.
Yeah.
Right? So basically, if it's like in the line of forever, what happened now and what happens a month from now is basically happening concurrently, I suppose, in some way, maybe to them, to their perception. I'm not sure.
That's interesting. Yeah, who knows? Well, last I thought we could talk about the Velveteen Rabbit.
Yes.
Tell me about your love of this book.
Well, don't at me, because it's a children's book.
No judgment.
I find it really moving and meaningful. It's a good comfort book for me whenever I want to... I've kind of forgotten who I am, or need to remember, or want a good cry, or want to feel connected in some way. I mean, I love this book. I love the way it's written. I love the way it's illustrated. I love how I have a stuffed animal that I grew up with, Huggy, who was given to me the day that I was born, who I still sleep with and travel with. He's like a polar bear, about yay big, and we called him Huggy, I think, because I hugged him from the drop, but now it's kind of got a double meaning, because all of the fur on his stomach, like from here to here, is just it's all gone, and he's kind of grayish and has been restuffed and has various colors of kind of, sewing thread that I've kind of doctored him up. I've never actually been brave enough to send him away to one of those places that properly doctor them, both because I'm scared that he'll get lost in the mail, which I'm sure he would not, but also because I'm not sure I want to restore him to his former glory.
That's the love
that's the love in the book. Life. Yeah, and I like the idea that, I mean, the story is quite dark.
Yeah, it is.
It's a very, very
the
dark.
Fever.
You're right. The boy gets the scarlet fever, and then they're like, burn all the belongings. And, the Velveteen Rabbit, who has been jealous of all of the other embodied real rabbits that he's seen, and wondered why he was not able to kind of move like that. He gets thrown on basically the funeral pyre and is about to be burned, and he's crying. He knows that, I mean, he's having very adult thoughts, like, I will never see this boy again. I won't be alive anymore. I won't, be experiencing things in my body in the way that I have. And he cries a real tear. And then suddenly in whatever your interpretation of this becomes real.
Yeah.
And this idea that it's only when we are really loved do we become real.
Yeah.
In any case, my therapist a couple years ago said, I really need you when you're feeling not great about yourself, down on yourself physically, to read this book, because everyone deserves love, even if they have, wrinkles and, furry spots worn off, or
that's
et cetera,
a great
et cetera.
Recommendation.
And I was like, are you recommending me a children's book? And he said, yes.
Do you read, does it calm you? Is that something, is that a book's often a tool for you in that way?
Yeah, in the way that sitting in a dark movie theater can make you momentarily forget you even have a body.
Totally.
That sometimes when I'm reading, I am so involved in the story that I forget I even exist.
Yeah.
And I find that escape really amazing.
Yeah. Do you read a lot to your kids?
Yes, I do.
That's so lovely.
I can't get them to do the whole Velveteen Rabbit, though. I think it's dark.
How old are they?
3 and 5.
Yeah, so they'll get there.
Like not there yet.
They're like,
we're still on Frog and Toad and
fun.
lots of other fun
and
series.
Do they do all the Julia Donaldson, like Gruffalo, all those British ones?
No.
They're so good. They're the best. Like they have Zog.
We do a lot of Little Miss and Little Mister series, which are also British.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're so fun.
They're really funny.
Do you sing to them as well?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and sometimes I try to leave my work at my work, but sometimes if I'm working on a new accent or something, they'll ask me to, they'll hear me kind of messing around with it. And my daughter asked me to read Green Eggs and Ham in a Rhode Island accent. So, I will not eat that Sam I am. I will not eat green eggs and ham. I will not eat them here. I will not eat them there. I can't eat them anywhere. And we just have so much fun being silly.
Oh, I love that.
With it. So that I try to leave work at work, but sometimes it's fun to play around with funny voices.
That is fun.
Uh-huh.
And do you sing for fun, like still, or?
Yeah.
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 That's so nice. What's your karaoke song?
Oh. I couldn't tell you the last time I've done karaoke.
No, I haven't done it. Actually, that's not true. I did it last year. I was about to be like, never.
What's your karaoke song?
Well, that's one we actually did. A bit of a deep cut, which was a mistake. It was me and another British girl at a work party.
Totally a mistake.
Yeah, because we did Bryan Adams and Melanie C from the Spice Girls.
Okay.
A song that they did, and no one knew it. We sang our hearts out.
What is the song?
It's called, is it Since You've Been Gone?
Since You've Been Gone. No, that's Kelly Clarkson.
That's Kelly Clarkson. There's another, I can't remember the exact name of it, but we did it and no one did it. And then our CEO went up next and did Mr. Brightside and everyone loved it. And I was like,
it's a crusher.
We didn't.
I had a
pick well.
huge Spice Girls obsession.
Oh, did you?
As a kid, yes.
Which Spice Girl were you?
I was Jerry Halliwell. I loved her so much.
Yeah.
In fact, such a huge obsession. It was probably my first pop culture obsession. And it was that and Celine Dion concurrently. Oh. And my best friend and I, who sang, Andrew Jablon, who sang in the children's chorus with me, we would hang at his Upper West Side apartment before or after we would sing at the opera. And we would do all things Celine Dion and all things the Spice Girls. We went to Spice World. We even found out that they were on a Thanksgiving Day parade float one year. And we went to the Thanksgiving Day parade. I remember, so now we're talking about the fallacy of memory. I remember it was pouring rain. I don't know if that was accurate. We'll have to look it up later. And we were in the front row, and as their float passed us, he grabbed my hand and pulled me under, and we ran after their float, and we got one of them to wave at us. And we didn't get in trouble for running into the middle of the Thanksgiving Day parade. So something must have been shining on us because we didn't get arrested at age 7 or 9 or whatever we were.
Oh, that's so special.
But we were totally obsessed with the Spice Girls. We even made a board game of the Spice Girls where it was their walk through Spice World or different tour stops, different songs. We would draw pictures of them. I'm pretty sure Celine was somewhere in the board game as well.
Two very different vocal ranges.
We were obsessed. Yeah. Totally obsessed.
Have you ever met any of them since any of the Spice Girls?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I feel like Wannabe's going to have to be your karaoke song then.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Zig, zig, ah.
Exactly.
I'm ready.
Because such a fun range of that as well, and just the bit of singing, bit of rapping.
Say Yeah, it's so funny. It's so fun.
You nailed it.
Great, I'm ready.
I was a sporty Spice Girl mainly because I just love sports, but I don't really.
Yeah, also she always looked cool and comfortable.
She certainly did.
Jerry Halliwell definitely looked. Yeah, Jerry and Victoria always looked just like horribly uncomfortable. In their like hugely high heels and hugely short skirts.
Yeah, they were walking home for the club at 7
and
a.m.
Emma Bunton too.
Yeah,
Baby Spice too.
I love them so much. I went to the England game on Saturday for the World Cup in Miami. They're playing Norway, and David and Victoria Beckham were both there in the crowd. And David was waving, and he held up his phone, and as his screensaver, he had Posh Spice.
Oh,
as like Victoria's Posh Spice, which I was just like, I love. He's
still so into her.
Still rapping the OG. It's so good. Were there any other books that you particularly loved as a child? That
I love the George and Martha series.
Oh yeah.
About the two friendly hippos. What else did I love? We talked about how much I loved Harry Potter.
Yeah.
I loved Madeline.
Oh yeah, lovely.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Loved. I was never hugely into Eloise.
Yeah.
I was always like, she's got it too good.
Yeah.
I was jealous. I was like, she's living in a deluxe apartment in the sky. And I'm in like the one bed with my mom. I'm not loving it.
Yeah. Where did you live in New York when you were growing up?
Upper East with my mom.
Oh, nice. So just the two of you?
Yep.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yep.
Gosh, that's it. And you were how old were you when you started performing at the opera?
7.
Gosh, that's young.
Yeah.
Wow. How would you feel if any of your kids wanted to? Yeah.
No. That's too young.
Yeah.
I think
7 is very young. That's the age that posh people in England send their kids to boarding school, and I'm like, that is young.
I guess it works for them. Exactly. I mean, I guess it worked in a way for me.
Yeah.
But no, I want my kids to be kids.
Yeah, and charge around and just Do you bring them, like, say when you were filming Furious, would you bring them on set at all?
I would bring them on set when I wasn't working.
Yeah.
But it was confusing for them. I mean, they're young enough that it's confusing. Like, they saw the bedroom where the character has, and then, you know, I was putting my son to bed that night, and all the lights were on. You know, we weren't like filming a scene. But as I was putting my son to bed that night, he said, "So when I go to sleep, are you going to sleep here or are you going to sleep there?" Oh. He didn't understand. So I think I assured him, you know, I only fake sleep there.
Yeah.
But I don't think he really grasped it yet.
Oh, that's
so I think there are ways that they're still trying to understand. And it's my job to kind of make them feel connected to me as much as I can when I'm working, but also have good boundaries so that it isn't distressing in any way for them.
Totally. How long were you filming for?
5 months.
Oh gosh, that's a long. And where were you filming?
Here.
Oh, it was in the city.
Yeah, so we were home.
Oh, amazing. That's so lovely.
Yeah.
That makes a difference, I feel like.
It's also different. There are certain, like I made a film in Rhode Island that was much lighter and much more silly. And I was able to have them kind of in and around what I was doing more often. They love when they get to come to set and I get to say cuss words. They get really excited. When I'm like screaming cuss words in a comedy scene, they'll love that.
That's amazing.
Love.
Oh, and they I bet that must be so fun for them. And they'll have all these like core memories of seeing you do it, which is so
and
nice.
I think to them, sets are places where there's like a lot of free food and like there are a lot of chairs.
Nothing
so you can
better.
have snacks in chairs.
Yeah.
Great.
The dream. Well, I loved Furious. I thought it was so, I'm like so excited I know they've got 3 episodes dropping fast, but it genuinely is thrilling. And you can feel the pieces moving into play on the chessboard. And I was like already locked in.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for these wonderful books.
Thank you. Thanks for chatting about it.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
That was fun.